Showtime! And welcome to Night Fright. Tonight we've got Wayne Franks, all the way from Montreal, a military reenactor. He's had many paranormal experiences on military sites. He has also had his own experiences, going to relate some different types of experiences that fellow reenactors have said to him. It's going to be a wild one, folks. Strap in and hang on. Here we go.
There is a time to question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
And tonight from Montreal, we've got Wayne Franks on the phone. Hi, Wayne. Are you there, my friend?
Hi, Brent. Good to hear your voice. How are you doing?
Good. Can you hear me okay now?
Oh, great.
Okay, great. Wayne, I was just promoting you just before, and I was saying that you're a military reenactor. You've been around to many, many reenactment sites right across North America. You've heard stories, you've witnessed stories, you've had your own experiences. Maybe we can start off with a pretty spooky story, actually, that you related to me that took place in your own house one evening when you woke up in the middle of the night and you heard moccasins and marching going on right through your house. I was wondering if you can, just to start off, tell the folks that story, and then I'm going to ask you how you got into reenacting.
Okay, well, let me preface all this by saying that prior to having the auditory illusions, hallucinations, auditory experiences that I had in my home in the early 90s, I always thought that the people who worked at these sites, like historic Fort Ticonderoga, et cetera, they would relate stories to me, which I'll get into later. And I always made wisecracks like, well, you shouldn't be drinking on the job and stuff like this. And they weren't greeted very, well.
Yeah. And
I didn't really place much faith in the things that they told me that they heard or they saw. I just thought it was illusion. People fooling themselves, maybe because they were tuned into a certain time or period. But, in our case here, we live in a home. It was built in 1964, so it certainly isn't a very old home at all by any means. Here in the southwest corner of the island of Montreal, and
it's a suburb called Ville-Salle, right?
Ville-Salle, yeah, named after LaSalle. In fact, he left for his explorations not more than a couple of kilometers down the street from here in the home of Charles Lemoyne, and it was built in 1669. Still standing, by the way. So
I didn't know that, Wayne. You're filling me in on all this stuff I didn't know.
A special place, Lemoyne House is what was referred to as a Lachine Museum. It's just right at the border of Lachine and LaSalle.
Sure. Now I know where it is, yeah.
Lachine, of course, was the joke. They called it China because, LaSalle was leaving there. So this is a very historic area.
Why don't you tell that story about Lachine, just so folks, because I know.
Yeah. Okay, so LaSalle in his explorations, he had set off, found himself down the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, he didn't have any idea of what was the route to China, so that was his mission. And he was derided here at home by the habitants who were living, in this area and down in what was now Old Montreal, and it was Ville Marie, I guess, in those days, or maybe they just started to call it Montreal at the time, and they decided to call the place where he stayed Lachine, which is China, basically, just to rib him a little bit. LaSalle himself wasn't a very, shall we say, socially skilled, adept person. Very intelligent, a very tall man for his time, with very strong legs and arms, and he did a lot of walking. He walked all over the east coast of North America, besides, sailing and all this stuff. So he was a pretty imposing figure, and people loved to hate the man, and that's how Lachine became to be known as the parish of Lachine. And 1912, Ville La Salle was created from the parish of Lachine, and of course this area has seen many actions against the Indians or Aboriginals or North American
First Nations,
whatever you want, First Nations, and not too far from my home is what we call in LaSalle Boulevard, which is Boulevard Saint-Joseph in Lachine, which used to be the King's Road, the Chemin du Roi, from the French regime to the British regime. And every mile, in fact, at some stretches of this road, you can see little tombstones, little millborn, or what they call milestones, and you would pay a toll. And this road is also a road that soldiers had marched up and down on their way to they couldn't go through the rapids, so they would have to march from downtown or the old Montreal through to Lachine to embark on boats to go further, and they would be passing,
Around what era was this, Wayne?
The late 1600s.
Okay.
So the Lemoyne-Lebert House was built, like I said, in 1669. So starting in the 1670s was the time where you would see, enough people here from 1665 with the Les Filles du Roi, the king's daughters, who were sent from France to marry these soldiers and itinerant fur traders. Then you start to see the population start to build up. So from the 1670s, you slowly start to see the population rise and spread out from the actual core of the village of Ville-Marie of Montreal, Old Montreal now, to areas further towards where the rapids are here, where they would do a little transshipment thing and transship by cart from ships that came in from Europe, from Old Montreal to Lachine, where they could travel on and bypass the rapids by land. So this was an area that was frequented by natives and Europeans alike, So getting back to 1992, I believe it would be about 2:30 in the morning when I heard outside my bedroom door like a scurrying of several pairs of feet on a hardwood floor, like in socks or soft shoes, And the sound started to, as I listened, and I said, "What could my dog be doing to make this type of noise?"
Yeah, I blame the dog.
Flap the sheets, blame the dog, right?
Yeah.
And, you get my drift?
Oh, yeah. All too well. Yeah.
And so, I'm being very fond of electroacoustics and acoustics in general in music. I was listening very closely to the textures of the sound, and I realized that the sound began to Doppler effect itself, Dopplerize, and started to go around and around and around and around and go faster, and fade to nothing.
Whoa.
So I opened my door, looked at my dog, and say, "What the heck were you doing?" And he was looking around like, "I don't know." And nobody else was awake at the time. And I thought about it for days and days and days and weeks what that sound could be. But it sounded like scurrying footsteps going and like Dopplerizing itself.
Did you think it could be maybe a radio? It could be the TV was left on, or maybe one of the kids or something?
Nothing.
Nothing like that, eh?
No, everybody was asleep at the time, and except for the dog, And, he probably only woke up when I opened the door, and he didn't know what was going on. And it was only a couple of months later that another incident really brought home what I think that I may have heard.
You're listening to Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
And that was the fact that I awoke to the sound of maybe a dozen hobnail-shoed men or soldiers or whatever, about 12 of these people or whoever marching in cadence, in 18th century cadence, one step per second. And it came in through the front of the house and went through the back. It was barump, 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 right through the house.
Oh my God. Now, was there a drum or anything that you could hear? It was just the feet.
Just hard
that
leather
sound.
Shoes coming down on my hardwood floor.
Whoa.
Just right through. And my daughter, my eldest daughter, ducked under the covers in her room. She told me later because she thought that some people were going to barge in. And I didn't even bother to get up. I was just mesmerized by the sound, and I just said, this can't be happening. And my son had actually opened the door and looked out down towards the kitchen and looked at the dog and said, what was that? Or,
what's going
made some
on?
sort of maybe a self-exclamation at the time. So, I mean, I wasn't the only crazy one. There were two other people who witnessed that sound, and it became apparent to me then that I must have heard a troop of ghost soldiers marching through my house.
Whoa.
There's no other explanation for it. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. 2:30 in the morning, I mean, there's nothing going on that sounds like that. There's no earthquake because the floor didn't move, the house didn't shake. There was no TV, radio on, nothing, absolutely nothing.
Was there any physical remnants in the morning when you got up? Was there nothing on the floor? Nothing, eh?
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. I just asked everybody if they heard that. And, those were the only other witnesses of the sound, if you can witness a sound,
Well, sure you can, yeah.
And, that was it. So then it made it very apparent to me that what I had probably heard 2 months prior were possibly moccasin footsteps going around and around in circles, because that would be the only thing that I would think that it could be tied in. I didn't quite tie it into the 18th century or 17th century or prior, because the natives have been here for 20,000 years. And
like maybe dancing around a fire or something,
or
ceremony.
Just an unorganized scurrying of footsteps, as opposed to 2 months later, hard-soled, shoed soldiers or somebody, a group of people, a platoon, whatever, a dozen maybe, marching in 18th century cadence from the front of the house through to the rear of the house. And that was what had happened. That's exactly what I had heard.
Isn't that incredible? What a story, Wayne. You'd mentioned your kids had heard the same thing. When you discussed it with them, what was their reaction? Did they smell anything? They often say when you see a ghost, it's cold and all those the typical scenarios. Was there anything similar like that?
Just a pure oral audio experience. And that's what it stayed at. And we never had heard anything similar before. Or since. That was the last one. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's been, 1992, so...
15 years or more?
Yeah.
Just let me tell folks who you are. Folks, you're listening to Night Fright. I'm your host, Brent Holland, and we're speaking with Wayne Franks tonight. He's a historian, and he's also a military reenactor, and he's relaying some of the stories he's heard and experienced. And he just relayed one of those stories. He's calling from Montreal. He's been a reenactor. Geez, how long have you been a reenactor, Wayne?
Started actively in the field in 1984.
And what got you in there? What led you to be a reenactor?
Okay, well, I guess two things. one was always having had an interest in the 18th century, and I think what it was Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Disney, where they had like Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett and all these great historical stories, and the series from the 50s and the Last of the Mohicans, and all these great Flintlock era programs and series. And everybody, when I was 5 years old, had like a Davy Crockett coonskin cap. You know, that was what they sold in the stores. You know, and I really felt at home in that era for some reason, and I had never known that it existed as a hobby until reenacting. That is, until about 1975, and I saw an article in the paper that some guys were doing Montgomery's March to Quebec, from the colonies to Quebec City, to try and take Quebec from the British for the Americans. And so I said, gee, yeah, some people are doing that. You know, I thought they had just gotten together and marched up there in uniform and whatever.
Just for something to do.
Yep, yeah, exactly. And, well, I was working at an elementary school in Lachine in the early 80s. I was introduced to a young chap there who was doing a speech on, it was a public speaking contest. So he was doing it on his father's hobby. When he brought in the picture, he showed me his dad in uniform, and I said, how do I do that? And that's how it started. And my now friend, Larry, he happened to be the only reenactor on the island of Montreal who was not connected in any way with Parks Canada.
I see.
So how fluky is that?
Yeah.
So that's how we met, and we started off and got into his regiment the following year. And
what regiment is that, Wayne?
Originally out of Ottawa. It was founded by the then head of the War Museum. It was called the King's Rangers. It was an offshoot of Rogers Rangers. But
I've heard of them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Instead of being from the French and Indian War, they carried over and reformed in the American Revolution. They were loyal to the British. And originally it was under Robert Rogers. He got too drunk and too in debt, thrown in jail in Britain, at debtor's jail. And then his brother James had to take over command. And they were disbanded in the early 1780s, 1782, 1783, 1784. Sailed in the Bay of Quinte area in Ontario. Were given tracts of land there as United Empire Loyalists, as discharged soldiers. So that's how I gained interest, and how I got into the actual hobby in the first place. So I was familiar with the sounds and sights of history by doing that on the weekends. So when I heard these sounds, apparently over a period of time, it dawned on me, this is what I've been hearing. Nothing else matched.
Except that. Now, you also mentioned at the beginning of the show, incidentally, folks, we're speaking with military historian Wayne Franks from Montreal, and Wayne is relaying some stories from his military reenactments and also his own personal experiences. At the beginning of the show, Wayne, you had mentioned that when you spoke with these people from the parks, the various parks and things, and they were relating their own paranormal stories, you were hesitant on believing them, kind of discarding them because they were perhaps, for lack of a better term, they might have been inebriated.
Well, I thought they were just maybe really not inebriated, but maybe just overly passionate about what they did at the parks, at the historic parks, or at the forts, or at the site, or at the museums.
Have you since changed your mind, Wayne? What they've
yes.
stated?
I can tell you, there's no question that, I've definitely changed my outlook. That, as I would tell anyone, there are explanations for everything. There is if there is a cause, there is a reason, and
that's very well put.
We just don't understand the reason. How can that happen? How can that sound be created so vividly in my house, in front of other people, out of nowhere? we didn't see anything because the sound had, passed through the house. Both times, the sound had dissipated before anybody had taken a look to see if they could see anything. But certainly, for people who are working at historic parks and all that, I kind of retroactively have to give them my apologies, my sincerest apologies for getting a ride out of them, more or less, because what they had to tell me was, from their point of view, as close to being an actual thing than what I had interpreted in my mind. I just thought it was like they heard something, or Fort Ticonderoga, which is one of the most haunted places in the world.
Oh, can you tell some stories about that you've heard?
Oh, yeah, Ticonderoga.
You're listening to Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland. Well,
Ticonderoga, if you're familiar with, who is the poet now? Very famous poet in Scotland.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. I can remember.
There's a poem called Ticonderoga. And it's about Duncan. I should have been more prepared for that.
That's okay. I kind of pulled that out of the hat. Where is Ticonderoga for the folks that don't know?
Ticonderoga is in upstate New York.
And it was famous for which war?
Well, Fort Carillon was built by the French in 1755. It was built by Charles, Chartier de Lotbinière. Michel Chartier de Lotbinière was built in 1755. It was called Carillon because the waters around the southern part of Lake Champlain and the northern neck of Lake George, the rushing waters sound like chimes. So it was called Fort Carillon. And 1758, they successfully repelled the British, and I just reenacted the 250th anniversary of that battle last June.
Congratulations.
Oh, it was fun. PBS has done a documentary on it. It should be out next year.
Fantastic. I'm going to look for you.
Yeah, and the bottom line is that it fell the very next year to the British, who renamed it Ticonderoga. And it just so happened that the previous year, this chap, Duncan Campbell, could it be his name? I can't remember now. He had a very strange event. And this kind of like sets the whole mood for Ticonderoga, because he was a traveler who came to his castle, and he let him in and gave him refuge for the night. And the next day he left. And the very next night, I believe it was, a ghost of someone he knew visited him and said that he should not have given quarter to this man because he had killed him that previous night.
Oh, my God.
And he said that you will die at a place called Ticonderoga. And so Duncan Campbell or Cameron, whatever his name was, he just... Well, it shook him up greatly, but he knew of no such place, and there was no way that he would ever know where Ticonderoga was. But sure enough, he had to go with his regiment, and he died in 1758 there at Ticonderoga.
Oh, gee.
And he found out on the way over that it was called Ticonderoga by the natives, but they were always referring to taking Fort Carillon, so he was thinking, oh, well, going to fight at Carillon. And then they told him, well, the natives called the place Ticonderoga, and his blood ran cold.
No kidding. I think I would have died right there from a heart attack. Can you imagine?
So that just sets it off right there. So 1759, the French basically abandoned the fort, and they abandoned the fort to the British, and who subsequently conquered Quebec, really at the Plains of Abraham in 1759, and by 1760 they'd taken control of Montreal, and the colony of New France pretty well capitulated to Britain right then and there. In 1763, they signed the peace treaty, Wow. So it was a very integral fort. It was like all other forts on the main highway of the day, which is a river.
Which is the river, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're 100 yards from the river, the St. Lawrence River, I should say.
And it controlled that fort controlled the comings and goings between south of Lake Champlain and northern Fort George, Lake George. So you couldn't get by there. And Fort George actually was at the southern part of Lake George. And a little bit further north, you had Crown Point or Fort St. Frederic. There were two forts built. The British built a fort just after the French, after they beat the French. And then at the top, you had Ile-la-Motte. You had a blockhouse up at Ile-la-Motte at the top of the lake. So the lake was pretty well covered by fortifications. And Ticonderoga was bought. The site was actually bought by a very wealthy philanthropist way back in the 1800s by the name of Pell.
Wayne, can you hang on to that thought for a second? We're coming up to the bottom of the hour. I'm just going to take a quick break for 3.5 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
I won't.
Okay. Folks, we're speaking with Wayne Franks. You're listening to CKLU 96.7 FM. Wayne Franks is a military historian. He is also a military reenactor, and he's relating some stories to us of the paranormal. His own experiences also in his own home. It's a fascinating subject because we had Michelle Desrochers on, and she was relating military reenactment stories that she had heard of the War of 1812. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to ask Wayne, what is it about military sites that seems to attract military ghosts? I'm going to ask him what he thinks the reasons are. There must be a plethora of reasons. This next song I'm going to play for the troops over in Afghanistan. It's called CFB Kandahar. And the reason why we can have a show like this is because those guys put their lives on their line every day. And if it wasn't for those guys, we certainly wouldn't be living in beautiful Sudbury or beautiful Montreal in peace and tranquility, where my biggest choice today was just whether to get a large coffee or a small one. We owe these guys everything. This is called CFB Kandahar. We'll be back in 3.5 minutes.
You're listening to Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
And we are back, folks. Tonight we're speaking with Wayne Franks. Wayne Franks is a military historian. He's also a military reenactor. And this is where it gets really cool because Wayne has had lots of paranormal experiences both on and off the reenactment field. He's had some at home, and he's going to be relaying some stories about Fort Ticonderoga, which is upper state New York, and various reenactment sites right around North America. You're also listening to CKLU 96.7 FM, and we are now streaming, folks. If you can get to your internet, you can reach us at www.cklu.ca and just click on the little link there that says streaming. And if you have some questions for Wayne, you could email me at nightfrightshow@gmail.com. nightfrightshow@gmail.com. We're back with Wayne right now. How you doing, Wayne?
Fine, Brent.
Good. Just before the break, we were talking a little bit about some more experience you've had, and I wonder if we can just pick up on that.
Sure. As I was saying, Pell, very wealthy beneficiary of history, he bought the site of Fort Ticonderoga, which was reduced to ruins because the French had blown part of it up, and it had, of course, seen some service during the American Revolutionary War, and was in pretty bad shape because what people do to forts is they take the stones and building materials and build their own homes with it. So it was, because these are all dressed stone.
Yeah, so it beats quarrying
they're
your
quarried
own
and
stones.
it's dressed stone, exactly, and the timbers from the roof and the tiles and all that, and these are all pilfered,
Yeah.
And don't forget, at the time, there's no historical value to anything.
Of course.
Because it's to them, it's the present.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
So Pell bought the fort, and he bought all the land that you could see from the fort around the lake. So that vista is uninterrupted.
Interesting.
And they proceeded to rebuild the fort around the turn of the century. They started, I believe it was around 1909 when they started putting things together. And by the 20s, 30s, 40s, they had quite a bit of it reconstructed. And then after the war, of course, was the big boom of highways and, interstates and people driving and, the baby boom. And they really turned that into a great educational tourist destination for historians.
Interesting.
And for kids who like forts and just to run around with those fake wooden muskets that they used to sell, So they had rebuilt the fort, and what they do, of course, they have some costume interpreters, but mostly what they have is a fife and drum corps. And they have kids from the local area, Crown Point, Ticonderoga, or whatever, and they pay the kids for the summer to do fife and drum corps there.
Well, that's a great summer gig, eh?
Yep.
That'd be fun to do.
I know a lot of the kids who became reenactors just because they had a summer job there. They have, like I say, costume interpreters and volunteers to work there. And I think my first encounter with a story, before anything had happened to me, of course, was I kind of brought up the imbibing at that time, which was kind of out of place. But it was probably late in the 80s. I was there doing a historical weekend, and one of the ladies had said to me that she was working late one night at the fort in a room just above where the mess hall used to be. And this fort is reconstructed according to the plans. So within a few inches of being correct all over, because we actually do have the plans extant today. So she was working in the office or in the room above, and often she would hear a clamoring of dishes and of men and joking and talking and laughing.
And she's supposed to be alone? See, I would have been out of there right then. Whoosh.
Well, she, me too. And she would just put her head down the stairs and just ask them to hold it down a bit because she's trying to get her work done.
That's funny.
And and she says they're all over the place, these and whatever, and spirits or entities or time travelers, whatever
they are,
and that they're not a threatening thing, because that was my first impression. I think I told her just as much as I would be lickety split out of there, you know. But she says they're not in any way threatening at all.
Wow.
And there's a famous chair there, Sir William Johnson. Sir William Johnson was the British liaison officer with the Native Indians, and he was from Ireland, a wealthy landowner, and he had land in central New York, and he was, of course, loyal to the British up to the beginning of the Revolution, where he had just missed the beginning of the Revolution. He had died in 1774. His son, Sir John Johnson, took over his post. And Sir William's chair and his safe is up in the fort on, let's say, second floor, I believe. And he was seen in his blended scarlet tunic, sitting in his chair.
You're kidding.
In his Irish brogue. And he was just, you know, story after story about the fort. At any rate, the fort interpreter, the fort guide, was downstairs, and they're just standing basically at the door. You know, it's basically many times it's just a self tour upstairs anyway. And people came down and said, "Boy, you know, that costume interpreter upstairs, man, does he know a lot about this fort?"
He actually spoke with him. Wow.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And so she said, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, there's a guy in a red coat, and he's sitting in the chair up there, and he's been telling fantastic stories about the fort." And she said, "Oh, well, we don't have the costumed interpreter upstairs."
You're listening to Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Whoa. Goosebump time.
The goosebump time. He's been seen in the chair talking to people. He's also been seen standing beside his safe, and over his shoulder is a portrait of George Washington, just very coincidentally. And to people who have seen him, he's as solid as you or I would be to appear to somebody.
Folks, we're speaking with Wayne Franks, military historian and military reenactor, and he's telling us some pretty creepy stories tonight about stories that he's heard around when he's been doing reenactments, and also his own personal experiences. You're listening to CKLU 96.7 FM, and we're streaming now on the internet, www.cklu.ca. Just hit the streaming button. You got some questions for Wayne, just email me at nightfrightshow@gmail.com. Wayne, I want you to speculate for a second now.
Sure.
Why do you think, I mean, there seems to be a plethora of sightings at military reenactment sites. Gettysburg comes to mind. Ticonderoga comes to mind. The War of 1812 comes to mind. What's your speculation on that?
Well, there is a reason, and there is an explanation. We just haven't discovered what those are as yet. I don't know if it's if you know, a religious person in one way would say, well, that's proof of life, you know, after death. Another religious person would say that's the devil playing with your mind. Other people would say, like me, would say, well, this could be a very freakish time warp. Some physicists speculate that actually time doesn't really exist, so that everything happens at the same time. So then you've got these wormholes in space. Like, how is that possible? So can you get a wormhole in time? Maybe some, you know, druids or somebody would say, well, that's like a portal to another world. Or so we don't really know, but all you do know is that sober people have had conversations with other people who are not currently living. And
That's for
there's
sure.
no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a fact. It's a fact, and it's happened in front of people. It's happened in front of dozens of people, and it's just not isolated incident or a handful of people like Sir William Johnson sitting in this chair. We've come across other stories at Ticonderoga where vast number of people have seen a very strange paranormal experience. And at Gettysburg, a huge number of dignitaries have seen a very strange sight. Can
you tell the folks about that story?
Sure. Let's go. Let's stick to Ticonderoga since we're there. There's many. Let's talk about the King's Garden. Now, the King's Garden is a part of the site, which is basically an 18th and 19th century garden as it would have been set up at that time by Mrs. Pell. She recreated a typical garden of that era with what we would call today heirloom fruits and vegetables. Okay, so they are the actual tomato that they would have eaten, say, a couple hundred years ago, which are smaller and tastier and maybe not quite so red, not quite so fake looking. And there's apple orchards there, which have a more juicy type of apple because it's not meant to travel great distances like our fruits and vegetables have to travel today. So taste doesn't take a back seat, like they do today. So anyway, there was a tour of this garden. It was very, very, very hot. And one of the costume interpreters was dealing with an emergency. And a rather hefty lady had fainted and hit the ground while taking this tour. And he was on a phone. There was a phone on the wall on the chalet at the King's Garden. And he was trying to dial the emergency. And some unseen hand had grasped him by the cartridge box that was hanging over his shoulder at his waist and pulling it horizontally and pulling him away from the wall, tugging on him. And all the people who were taking the tour, may have been a dozen, may have been 24 or more, were saying, "Wow, how are you doing that?" "I'm not doing that." And some unseen force was pulling him away from that phone on the wall.
Oh, gee.
Very strange.
Very frightening. Very frightening, I would say.
Frightening. And don't forget, too, the native connection to that area, which I want to mention before I forget. One of the chaps that does work there now, an Amerindian who is an employee of the park and works there 12 months a year even when it's closed. He lives on the site. His daughter was home. She saw him come into the house, and she passed by the bathroom, and she saw her father standing there looking at himself in the mirror. And then she went back to say, "Well, how come you're home so early?" And there was nobody there. And it was a dead end. It was at the end of the hallway. He couldn't have possibly got out. So an hour or two later, he came driving back up the driveway and into the house. She said, "How come you were home earlier like that? For what reason? We got off early or what?" He said he wasn't home at all.
Ooh.
And he's relayed the story to me also, and he calls it the trickster. Now, there's such a thing as a doppelganger. Maybe some of your listeners have heard that. It's basically your double.
That's right.
And he's doing things that may or may not be proper. Okay? And in the morning, my friend Wesley there, he's an Abenaki, and he will sometimes run up through the woods to the fort. He has to open the museum gift shop, turn off the alarms, and get everything ready for the people to come in, the volunteers and the employees to start at 9 o'clock. So one day he was seen to be running up the road and through the woods up to the fort by the volunteers or the employees that man the cache and do the tours. And they didn't want to beat him to the fort in their car, so they just slowed right down and waited a few minutes until he would get in the fort to turn the alarms off and everything, open the lights and get everything ready for them. And so they got in there and they saw him a bit later and they said, "Oh, we saw you jogging up to the fort this morning," because often he would do that. And he said, "No, I didn't run up to the fort this morning. I drove up here." No, you didn't. No, you didn't. He said, "Yes, I did." And he pointed out the window. There was his pickup truck.
Oh.
And he was also another time seen at two places at once. And another time during the winter, he was doing some photography, and he took a picture of a deer in the field not too far away. And when he developed it, there was an image of a French soldier on one side and a native on the other.
Isn't that incredible?
There were no reenactors in the park.
Nowhere near.
And talking about no reenactors in the park, okay, it had been a dream of one of the interpreters to go down to Gettysburg and work there, because of the fact is that that's also hallowed ground and also one of the most haunted places on Earth, especially for military.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Even during the daytime, there it's just
ghosts
a real
are everywhere.
Experience. Oh, there's something there. There's no question.
Without question,
that. Yeah, and there was
let me tell folks who we're speaking with. Sorry,
sure.
We're speaking with Wayne Franks. He's a military historian, military reenactor, and he's relaying to us paranormal experiences and stories that he's heard over the years from the military reenacting battlefields, ghosts that have been seen, spooky things, scary things, heartwarming things. And what's very interesting is he's telling us stories that have happened to him himself right in his own home. You're listening to CKLU 96.7 FM and www.cklu.ca on the internet. You're listening to Night Fright. I'm your host, Brent Holland. Now, folks, when you're listening at home, don't do this in your car. If you're at home, turn the lights off. This is going to creep you out because Wayne's got some really spooky stories for you.
You're listening to Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Right now we're going to go back to Wayne. And Wayne, please tell the folks this spooky, scary story. Turn those lights off at home.
We were touching on Gettysburg.
That's right.
Gettysburg being the most haunted site probably in the U.S. In general, you know. The White House is very haunted as well, and I use the word haunted because there are just so many unexplained things that's happening there. I'm not using it necessarily in the...
Just to interrupt you for a second about that, George Bush has seen President Lincoln's son. And not only George Bush has seen President Lincoln's son, but Chelsea, President Clinton's daughter, saw Lincoln's son also. Lincoln's son died, I think it was scarlet fever, if I'm not mistaken, right in the very room that Chelsea was sleeping in.
Wow.
So there's all kinds of spooky things going on there. Sorry to interrupt you, Wayne.
Yeah, well, you know, who knows why, but... I think anywhere that has a very strong emotion has things recur like this, and whether we're there to see them or not, who knows whether they go on all the time and you just happen to witness it, or is it waiting for you? And at the point at the Gettysburg, where a chap I knew had his dream fulfilled because he filled in for the National Park Service. For one of his friends who actually was at Gettysburg, so he was so enthralled that he was there to give a tour. And a group of executives, businessmen, whatever, were there that day, and he was giving them an exclusive tour of the fort. He was standing facing them and explaining something at some point in the field of battle, which is huge. And he noticed that they were more like looking past him for some reason, and not really focusing on him. They were focusing on something else. So he found that a little unnerving, and he finished up his talk. And then they started to open up and say, wow, that was really great, that military maneuver that was going on in the bush there. platoon of, I think they were Confederates, had come out and did some sort of a dividing of going into a column, two from a line, or from a line into columns, and some special type of maneuver, and then peeled back into the woods. And they said those reenactors were really, really good, you know? Well, there were no reenactors in the park.
I saw it coming. Oh, man.
And there were maybe 10 or 20 or maybe more of these executives or businessmen who were there. These people weren't all drunk. What did they see? And there were no reenactors there.
Yeah.
And, of course, at night there are so many things that have happened there. And also in Pennsylvania, not too far away, is the Battle of Brandywine.
That's right.
Brandywine Park. Chad's Ford, where Andrew Wyeth did his painting. Well, down that area, the national park has many homes that were taken over by Lafayette and Washington, and the British farmhouses, of course, and beautiful stone farmhouses. And people that lived near the actual battlefield. Battlefield was just north, up I think Highway 1 of the actual park. The battlefield is actually not a park; it's open for development. And I did the last reenactment that was slated for that area before it was going to be developed. I don't know if they did develop it. And people that lived down there were telling me that they would be in the kitchen and they would see like a bluish light, white bluish light, and flickering and flashing. And one woman looked out the kitchen window and saw the British marching through her backyard, actually, just from the waist up. Couldn't see their legs or anything, but from the waist up, and they were marching, thousands of them, marching up into position.
Wow. Unbelievable, huh?
And at the park itself, at the National Park, Brandywine, they have a reception center with a small museum and an extensive library in the back. And they've got thousands of reference books. And these are on heavy steel shelving. Well, one day, something black and evil got into there when they were there and started going back and forth in that room, throwing those 1,000-pound, 2,000-pound shelving units around like they were matchsticks.
That's
just
creepy.
Destroyed the whole place and left.
And that was it.
Yeah, everything was all askew. Everything was askew. And that was extremely scary, and those people don't really like to talk about it today.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to talk about that particular one either. That's a little bit more than just soldiers' apparitions. It's more threatening and violent.
That's people tell me if you see something that's black, that's not a good thing.
That's what I've been told also. Wayne, we're at the top of the hour again. When we come back, I would very much like to go back into your own personal experiences in your home, if that's good with you.
We could do that.
Okay, great. Folks, we're going to take a quick break here. You see somebody in uniform out there, folks, downtown or something, you say thank you, because the reasons why we have this beautiful country is because they put their lives on their line every day in Afghanistan. A good friend of mine, Wendy's husband's just gone back over for a second tour. I want to wish him well and safe journey there and back. Thank you guys for doing what you do, because without you we wouldn't have nothing. This one's called Task Force Kabul. We'll be right back, folks.
Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent, Holland.
And we are back. And tonight, folks, right now we are talking with Wayne Franks. And Wayne Franks is a military reenactor and a military historian. And he's telling us some pretty creepy stories there, Wayne, tonight. He's telling us personal stories about what happened at his home and also stories from his reenactment sites. And right now, Wayne's going to go back into one of the stories that took place right in his own home about a little girl and her mother. How you doing, Wayne? Welcome back.
Doing great, Brent.
Great. This
Good
is
to be here.
Great show tonight.
Thank you.
I hope everybody is listening. Turn those damn lights off. Get into the mood. Let's rock.
Absolutely.
Sketty. Turn the lights off, sit in the dark, and get creeped out with the wind blowing here and the rustling leaves. Right now we're back with Wayne Franks.
Yes, Brent.
Thanks,
so,
Wayne. Yeah.
You know, you don't have to have the lights off.
To be creeped out? Because I've got all the lights on here in the studio, if you saw this place, because I'm creeped out just listening to these stories.
Right. When I was in my broadcasting days in Montreal, I worked overnight shift at an AM station, and a few weird phone calls, and I had the lights on. It was pretty spooky in that lonesome loft of a radio studio all by myself. So I know just what it is. But to have the experiences of visual or auditory hallucination or experiences, you don't need to have the lights off. What happened in our house, we had those two stories which I alluded to before about middle of the night, about 2:30 in the morning, the scurrying footsteps of like moccasins, and which Dopplerized, and the sound went around and around and around and faded out. And then 2 months later in 1992, a platoon of soldiers marching through my house in 18th century cadence, 1 step per second with hard-soled leather shoes.
Incredible story.
Incredible. It wasn't until at least 10 years, at least 10, 12 years after that, 14 years after that, that the first manifestation of apparition happened. It was here in this room, actually, that I'm speaking in. I'm speaking from my daughter's bedroom that we made in the basement.
Okay.
And the doorway, there's a doorway that leads into my playroom, and the stairway leads upstairs. So my wife one day, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, was watching a soap opera downstairs for some reason, and she has her, the door is like behind her, it goes into this room. If you can imagine, just inside this bedroom, there's a door immediately to the right, if you're looking out, which is my recording studio, and then a door to the left, which goes into my garage. So she, for some reason, decided to look over her shoulder. And there she saw what she describes as a Victorian-era woman walk across the doorway as if she had gone from my recording studio into the garage. And she said her hair was brown, was up in a bun. She had a white frilly shirt on that covered her neck, and blue gown or long dress, I believe it was, and gave a very detailed description, even though she saw her only for a fleeting moment, and will only tell you to this day that it was all in her own head. And prior to this, or concurrent and prior to this, my girls had auditory hallucination that they were being sung to as they were trying to get to sleep, lullabies.
Really, eh?
They were sung to in this room here, lullabies by a woman, possibly a child too. And not too long after the so-called Victorian woman, we call her, or Evangeline, my wife has just nicknamed her, my youngest daughter was going to show my wife something at the computer, and they sat down in front of the black screen because the computer was yet to be turned on, and in the reflection of the monitor, of the unlit monitor, they see a girl sitting with her legs up, folded up, sitting on the floor behind them with her long wavy hair and her frilly dress and her long white socks and her little black shoes. Just the stereotypical Hollywood image.
Little girl.
And so they both turn around to look. Nothing.
Nothing.
Then they both turn around and look back at the screen. Nothing.
Nothing. Gone. Just in a flash.
Yeah. So we think, and so let's finish with them. There's one more appearance, which just happened a couple of years ago. I'll get back to the lady and her possible daughter in a second.
Okay.
But up on my main level, on my main floor,
right.
This is what we call a duplex here in LaSalle, in Montreal. We have a lot of them. The very, very top floor is rented out, and the first floor and the basement is for the owner,
Right.
So
separate entrances.
Yeah.
Yep.
So going up to our, from the playroom up to our main living floor, my wife had seen a very tall, skinny man in tights standing at the front door. And not more than a week or two later, my youngest daughter, same daughter, saw him standing around the back door in cut-off shorts, cut-off jeans.
That's creepy.
Same man.
Yeah.
Same man. Tall, skinny man, but he was like from the 1970s type of the way he dressed,
Yeah.
And so getting back to this woman and her daughter, and I was wondering, it seemed to tie in so well with the lullabies, and that the kids have been telling us for a long time that had been sung to them, and we thought, they're just hearing something,
Yeah, they're kids, right? Yeah.
Just imagining something off in the distance, and it's not really there. Because sometimes you hear a song, you think you hear a song, but you don't, and I was thinking that was the type of thing. But I mentioned that to a coworker, a former coworker of mine, who was the past president of the LaSalle Historic Society. And he told me that the land that was behind us was a golf course, and before that was the Ogilvie farm, and before that was a Somerville farm, and that Mrs. Somerville and her daughter are buried on that property.
Oh, man.
And my son's friend had said that his father used to play around this area here before our duplexes were built, and right along where our backyard fence is, there were tombstones.
Is that right?
And about 5-6 years ago, 7 years ago, my neighbor kitty corner to us, who passed away since, she said that she's a Scotswoman. She's big on gardening, and she was digging up things to prepare her beds for tomatoes and everything. Sure. And she swears that she came to flat stones, which had been tombstones, which were toppled over.
Oh, you're kidding! So they never moved the graves.
Right.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and when I asked the author of a book on the LaSalle area, he had a little cross where, my coworker friend, where they had a little cross where the cemetery was. It was placed approximately in the middle of the farm, and I asked him, well, why did you place it there in the middle of the farm, the family Somerville family cemetery? He says, well, I just placed it there on the map in the book because I didn't know exactly where the private cemetery would be, but he said it would make sense that it would be at the perimeter of the property as opposed to in the middle somewhere, because you would have to farm around it. So later on, that area became the rough of the LaSalle golf course.
Oh.
So these stones were all overgrown with sumac and whatever, and were probably toppled and fell over and then got buried over when they did that. So we're thinking that that's Mrs. Somerville and her daughter that paid us a visit.
That makes perfect sense. I'm just wondering if maybe somebody would want to do an excavation and see if indeed the graves are still there.
Could be. You'd have to get some ultrasound type equipment and do that. But one time I was in my studio here and I was playing the piano. I'm a classical composer and pianist, as you know, and I felt a real strong presence. And I just said out loud, Mrs. Somerville. And from that point on, I've very, 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 very seldom ever had that feeling of presence again.
Isn't that funny? You had the presence of mind to actually speak her name.
And it seemed like all she wanted was maybe recognition. Maybe I'm drawing way too much.
No, I don't think so. As I said, we had Michelle Desrochers on. She was relating a story where her little girl had gone into her bathroom and had witnessed a fellow hanging there. She went and told her mother, because both are clairvoyant, that indeed there was a man hanging in the bathroom. And her mother said, don't worry, now that he's had recognition, he's going to go away. And indeed, he'd gone away. So what you're relating to me, Wayne, makes perfect sense. Perfect sense.
Wow.
It's incredible how there seems to be a commonality between different ghost sightings, and almost like there is an unspoken law or something that once you recognize them, then they do go away for some reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's very strange that you say that, because an unspoken law, it's like anytime you have a bad spirit in the house and they're talking, they usually say two words, "Get out."
Yeah.
You know, it's like...
Yeah, the Amityville Horror thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of silly, and it's kind of cliche, you know, but there was certainly nothing cliche about the sightings.
Maybe she was attracted to your music.
That's possible. Whatever these spirits, ghosts, entities, apparitions are, it is true that they can be attracted to music. I remember the manager of Fort Wellington in Prescott, Ontario, had said that people have seen the soldier ghost there all the time.
You're listening to Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
It appears as basically a white light near a window. And a lot of people think it's just a trick of your eye. But one time they were sitting down at this long table, and one of the interpreters was practicing the fife. And they had a Ouija board out, and they got this guy. They got the name of the guy, the regiment of the guy, Timothy. I forget now.
I've heard so many creepy stories, Wayne, about Ouija boards, and we did discuss that also with Michelle.
Yeah, and they found out that he was actually sitting in the chair beside the guy who was practicing the fife because he liked the music.
Isn't that a credible story?
Yeah.
Holy
cow. The music.
He was attracted to that, and he
was attracted.
Hell, he just wanted to jam.
Maybe,
huh? We are indeed speaking with Wayne Franks tonight. He's telling some incredible stories about ghosts that have been seen on military reenactment sites. Wayne is a military historian of great depth, as I'm finding out as we go through this interview tonight, and I'm learning so much. And he's also a military reenactor. And he's relating those stories from reenactment sites, but also he's telling his own personal stories. And you're listening to CKLU 96.7 FM, www.cklu.ca. We are now streaming, folks. You can tune us in on your internet, no matter where you are in the world, even in Montreal, where Wayne's calling from. If you want to ask Wayne some questions, we do have an email. You can email us here at nightfrightshow@gmail.com. And Wayne, let's go back in and talk a little bit more about your own personal experiences.
Sure.
You had mentioned in a pre-production meeting something about some white orbs and some pretty creepy things about stabbings and things like that went on around them.
Yeah, very, very, very strange cases of a lot of the homes around the older part of LaSalle, Verdun, The Point. A lot of strange things have been seen in these homes. These were basically working class homes for people who were at the lower scale of society, built from the 1920s and back. There are all types of strange things that have gone on there. Personally, I haven't seen it, but in my family, one of my children had a place here in LaSalle in the older section, which is called Bronx Park. And he had seen a white apparition go down the hallway and into the living room. These places are all narrow, and all the rooms are off of basically one hallway and until you get to the back of the house, and then there's basically a kitchen and a bathroom. You know, they're very cramped places. And he saw that during the day, and immediately following that, I believe there was the death of his girlfriend's aunt at age 40 who dropped dead at work for no known reason. And then the entity was seen at night, which is like in subdued lighting, it appears dark. In almost virtually no light, it appears darker.
Oh, man.
Right. Whenever it did make an appearance, their cat got run over. another friend or relative died. The neighbor next door committed suicide by slashing himself to death.
So this was an evil entity then?
Yeah, but I do believe that was I know from a fact that there was a very evil entity, and in fact they had a clairvoyant have a look at it.
Is that right? And what was her result?
The clairvoyant was saying that it was basically someone in that house had witnessed a murder on the street and knew who was the perpetrator but didn't come forward.
Oh, man.
Also, there was a mortuary across the street, too, and ask anyone who knows, every mortuary is haunted.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and even though the mortuary had been closed and it was being converted into condos, it was still operating as a mortuary. When my son lived there, yeah. So
speaking about mortuaries,
you're listening to Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Folks, if you've ever been to Montreal, in the middle of Montreal, there's a mountain. It's called Mount Royal. And on Mount Royal, there's a huge graveyard. Wayne's got a story he's going to tell us about some friends of his that picked up quite an interesting hitchhiker along the way. I was wondering if you could relate that story to us now, Wayne.
Right. Well, my reenactor friend, one of his sons, he was up on Mount Royal. We have two cemeteries up there. There's a Catholic cemetery and a Protestant cemetery. They're very historic. We have people who built the great railroads, people who perished on the Titanic. We have the lady who was the King and I. What was her name? She's up there too.
She's up there. Van Horn's up there also when you mentioned
the Van Horn. Yeah. So many historic people, and I'm not saying that these cemeteries themselves are haunted, because from what I've been reading and from what my understanding is, people, if they're how can I say, people if they're dead, the spirit of those who have passed, there's nothing in a cemetery for them to do. They don't want to be with nothing. They want to be with the people who are living and at the places where they lived, apparently. So very unlikely that you would find haunted cemetery. There's just really not much there, but really, when you get down to it, compared to places where people who are currently living, at the forts and at homes and stuff, that's where you'll find strange things happen. So one night, a lady was hitchhiking up on the circular road called CAMELOT. Actually, it circles the mountain, and she looked like quite attractive, from behind, and then there were a carload of guys,
Yeah, your friends are pigs, Wayne.
Yeah, I know. What can I tell you? They were just trying to be kind of nice and
kind of nice. Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Help this poor girl out, and when they pulled over to talk to her, she was absolutely hideous.
Oh my God.
Absolutely hideous. And they changed their mind. And I don't know if she had actually gotten in the car and they kicked her out, or they were just talking to her at the side of the road. But the conversation didn't go too well after she found out that they were just going to take off. And she put a curse on them.
Really?
And I don't know if it was a driver or the person that she was talking to in the front seat, but she was talking to them and more or less told them about this, that she was upset that she wasn't going to be picked up. So the short of the story is they all laughed it off and sped away. But not too long afterwards, at the chap's house, all the drawers started to open.
Oh,
Things started to come off the shelves and fly across the room and smash on the floor and bounce off walls, and cutlery would fly, and it was just so terrifying to them that they actually had an exorcism performed in the house.
Really?
To get out
to get the
whatever it was
that evil
that was
spirit out of the house. What a story. That's incredible. We're coming up to the bottom of the hour again. When we come back, Wayne, I'd like you to relay some more stories to us about... this is a fascinating evening, folks. We're speaking with Wayne Franks, military historian and military reenactor. And Wayne is relaying some stories to us about incredible stories, actually, that have taken place on reenactment sites right around North America, and some of his personal experiences. And those are pretty creepy in their own right. I hope you're as creeped out as I am, because I don't want to be alone in this, folks. If you're home alone, turn those darn lights off and get into it. The wind's blowing outside, it's cold, it's creepy. We'll be back in 3.5 minutes. This one's for the troops that are fighting in Afghanistan and keeping us safe. This is called Thunder Run.
You're listening to Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
And we are back, and I hope you folks are as creeped out as I am, because tonight we're speaking with Wayne Franks, military historian and a military reenactor, and he's telling us stories about military reenacting sites and all the creepy ghosts that have been seen around there, people having bad experiences and indifferent experiences. And Wayne's relaying some of his own experiences to us right now. Wayne, I wonder if we could just continue and pick up a couple of more stories. There was one in particular about shadow people I was going to jump into and talk a little bit about, if you don't mind.
Well, I always thought shadow people was something stupid. And if you remember, Spielberg in the 80s had Amazing Tales. Amazing Stories, that great series, which you can buy on DVD in sets, you know. And one of them was one the series about shadow people, and I just thought this was like made up by kids, you know. It's like the boogeyman under the bed, you know. This, you know, a dark apparition of some sort, and I always thought it was just, you know, kid stuff. And until I bumped into a coworker who grew up in an area that was just rife with shadow people. And in Point St. Charles, as you might know, is a very...
Can you describe the area for us?
Yeah, it was a working class area from the 1840s, 1850s.
The Irish settled there, right, during the potato famine?
Right, right. They built the Victoria Bridge, they helped build the canal, and public works, and were involved with manning the fire department and the police department, somewhat similar to the Irish communities of Boston and New York. No different here.
That's right.
You know, and the fact that they were Catholic didn't hurt at all, because many of them, you know, married into the French-Canadian Catholics here.
As a matter of fact, the biggest St. Patrick's Day parade, second biggest St. Patrick's Day parade next to New York's, is in Montreal, in North America, in the world.
And I believe ours is the longest lived.
Is that right?
I think we started before New York.
I've had many a good time with green beer in Montreal on that particular day, but I digress. Let's continue with the spooky stories, not the scary stories.
Well, my friend Alan had related to me a story about shadow people, and when I was sitting down talking to him one afternoon, he began to tell me some stories about this. And I'll start off with the main story. He was visiting his mother's house, I believe, and was in the Point. This is going back 6 years when he relayed this story to me. Anyway, he saw this shadow coming down the hallway, and he figured, this is somebody broke into the house, somebody's in the house, and I'm going to tackle this guy.
I would have done that too. I would have figured, somebody's in the house, and let's go, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, when this whatever came by him and he tackled it, there was nothing there.
Oh man.
It was basically. It was basically like the way I can describe. I guess. Yeah, you know, I've seen something similar myself after he described that at Villemard, where I was actually working in the school that he was working in, and he was describing to me, and this is exactly what I had seen, but there were children in this elementary school playing in the gym, and I was going through a corridor, and I thought I saw a little kid run by, cross my path, and crouch down as if he was picking up a ball. And that scenario is what he told me that they see all the time in these houses in the Point and in Verdun, where like a little kid will cross your path and then crouch down as if he's picking up a ball. And it's daytime. And I guess the only thing to describe it is it's not quite shadow, but it's like a piece of, would you say, cellophane that has a little bit of a tint in it, so you could just see that it's slightly gray. You know, like just a little bit of
just a little hint of
tint, like a tint film to your window, but the car window, but not dark, just like barely there,
and no substance around it at all.
Right, with these basically little kids, and they, like I said, they run past you, and then they crouch down like they're picking up a ball. And that's exactly what he described to me, and it's exactly what I saw in an elementary school. And there's no way that the kid could cast shadow, a real actual shadow, my way at all. It's just impossible. And getting into schools now, of course, I work for a school board here, and for many years, this is a story that I've completely forgot about until now that we're talking about schools. But there's a school in Montreal West called Elizabeth Ballantyne School, and there was a story circulating there that that place was haunted. Now, I never knew anything about this. I never knew anything about this. Apparently, a boy had fallen down the staircase and broken his neck.
That's horrible.
Many decades ago. That's the story, and I feel so bad for the little boy and his family. The short of the story is, one night I was working overtime at the school, and anyway, that afternoon, the day man was still there, and I'd come from my school to go over to his school. This would be about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Between 98 and 2000.
Okay.
Put it that way.
After the ice storm.
Yeah. And so I was there, and told me that the week before they had just received a whole shipment of computers in the school in the computer room in the top floor, and that somebody had used tools to get through the door to break in and clean out the computer lab. So I was just told this story, and they had just received replacements for it, I believe, at the time that I was working there. And they told me, well, just make sure that all the alarms are on tonight before you leave, because we don't want anybody breaking in, you know, and all this stuff, of course. And we want to make sure that all the motion detectors are on and whatever, you know. So I said, yeah, no problem. I'd worked at that school on and off as, you know, as either I was assigned to that school for a few nights or just filling in, you know. And the short of the story is that there's a 3-floor school. There's 2 floors above ground and like what they call the basement, but it's actually at ground level.
Okay, I understand. It's like half underground, half above.
Right,
Okay.
it's one of those asphalt basement type. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'd finished my middle floor. I'd finished the upper floor when there was staff in the building. Got all the upper floor done, and was doing the middle floor with the offices, and I left that to among the last of it because offices are always occupied a little bit later and don't like working around people, and because you feel like you're in their way. So anyway, I was finishing up around the office, and I heard like power tools.
And you're supposed to be alone in the school?
Yeah. Okay, supposed to be alone. And you know when the sound of a power tool when you put it down on concrete,
there's like a
and it's
rumbling
above your head.
Yeah.
You hear it, you know, like that little clunk of somebody putting down something, and pick up another tool. And I heard various tools. It sounded like I heard 2 people talking. So I said, "Wait a minute, this has got to be somebody's. Maybe when the house is facing, it's got to be an open garage door. Somebody's got a workshop, and it's a father with his teenager son or neighbor. They're talking. They're cutting wood. They're doing something. It's got to be, you know." But I couldn't understand why I would be hearing footsteps and the putting down of tools. But maybe it's just coming in from the houses across the street. The sound's bouncing around the building and sounds like it's upstairs.
Yeah, you would always default to try and find a logical explanation.
Right, because Lawrence School, Lawrence School in the Point was built right on the sidewalk, and the sound from the people living across the street would come into that building and reverberate all over, and you thought there were people in your building. Now, this school was of the age of about 100 years old, this building. So I didn't know anything about this story, about this apparition, about this accident, nothing of that nature at all. And so I heard this, and I got pretty spooked. So I hurriedly finished with work I had to do on the middle floor. I came downstairs and already done what I had to do down there. I was about maybe 9:15 by that time, and I checked outside. I went out and I looked out the door. I checked to see if any garage door was open or any windows were open or people were working on those homes or in those homes across the street. No. Nobody. Nothing. Zilch.
Did you think about getting the hell out of there? That's just
well,
me.
It was about 9:15. I called Central Alarm. I told them I'm putting on the alarm switches and I'm getting out of here as fast as possible.
Smart move.
If you get a motion detector go off, top floor, call the police right away because I don't want to go up there and find that people are up there.
Yeah.
I threw the switches on. None of the default lights came on, so there couldn't have been really anybody there. But I just took off. And you had to go through the basement with all the lights off to get to the only unarmed door that had a timer on it so you could get out. And so that was a panic run, let me tell you, to the parking lot where I got my car and I just floored it and got the heck out of there.
I would have done the same thing.
Checking the back of my van to think that maybe somebody was hiding and lurking in the back of my van and maybe will appear in my rearview mirror. Oh, I was terrified. And the alarm operator at the school board was laughing her head off when I told her this. And I didn't know why she would be laughing her head off until I found out what the story was from the principal at the school that I was currently working at during the day.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, well, that popped up somehow with this subject. Oh, that school's supposed to be haunted.
You're listening to Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
What? And then he related to me the story, and I said, oh, well, that's why I heard what I heard. It was all auditory illusion, auditory hallucination. And somehow I was prepped, my mind was prepped for hearing those noises that had probably happened the week before. But they regurgitated themselves, recurred for me when I was on my shift. And there was nobody there because I called the school the next day. And there was nothing out of place. There was no signs of forced entry anywhere. There were no
Nothing
tools.
at all.
Nothing at all.
That's creepy, Wayne. Folks, we're speaking with Wayne Franks, military historian, military reenactor, and Wayne has been relating some stories to us about paranormal experiences both on and off reenactment military fields and also in his own personal life. Wayne, you mentioned before you're also an accomplished composer. I know this for a fact because we used to jam together.
Right.
I've got a piece here, folks, that he's written, and he's such an accomplished pianist. You've got to hear this guy play. It's called On Gossamer Wing, and it's an original composition by Wayne. It's classical. You got to hear this, folks. I'm just going to play it right now, okay, Wayne?
Sure, it's great.
If you want to make comments all the way through it, you're more than welcome to.
You're listening to Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. That was just a pre-production recording that I made just to get an idea of my arrangement, because the piece had been written in '96, and the introduction had been written only a couple of years ago, and I'm just trying to get exactly what I would like to have arranged down pat before I go in the studio at Studio Epilogue here in Montreal. Be starting recording my all-original compact disc, so we'll see how much material I have. I may actually add some Chopin list as encores, depending on how much material I'm going to have. Release date, probably sometime 2011, which will be my favorite composer's bicentennial birth, Franz Liszt.
Very cool. Will you be recording on grand piano or upright or sample?
Yeah, a 6'9" Bechstein, a 1906. Yeah, fully restored with a Renner action, new strings, and like I said, I'll be starting it, and I'll be just doing it one composition at a time. Every couple of months, I'll go in and hopefully have one in the can until. I have a good hour's worth of material. I've got several pieces to actually finish before then, too,
Well, if they're all the quality of that, it's going to sell out. It's absolutely brilliant. Your performance is astounding. Absolutely astounding. I can just see your fingers flying across the keys.
That was done in one take.
One take?
Yeah.
Oh,
man. That was
man.
done in one take on my laptop, which is... have a little problem with the sound card on there for some reason or something, so there was some glitching. I was testing out a USB condenser microphone that's powered by USB only, and it seems to do the trick, and definitely for demo work, it's a quick and dirty way to do something, Now,
what did you perform on?
I have an upright Bailey piano, which is it's an upright, but it's basically a studio height. It's not a fully upright, what they call upright grand.
Oh, I see what you mean.
But it's the family piano from Detroit, Michigan, when my mother's family relocated from Lachine to Detroit about 1924-25, and they gave their piano away in Lachine, and then they bought a new one in Detroit. So that's the piano that had followed the family back here in 1930. And that's the piano that resides in my studio here.
Nice. It sounds really good, actually.
Yeah, it was just tuned, and that's why I decided to pop the lid open and put the mic out and try out the USB mic. And I've got, of course, more equipment here. The next time I want to do a very quick demo, I have my studio set up here, a multi-track system.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Stuff like that. So the next one will be cleaner and better. But like I say, it was only a working guide for me, and I emailed a few of them out to good friends and family. Because people have been telling me, you've
absolutely
got to put your stuff out. And nothing is forever. And one day, when I go... the music goes, because this has not been written down, and none of these pieces have been actually formally recorded, besides a few videos of me playing at functions at work and at family reunions, So it's all very transcendental. It's about flight, and it's about personal flight and personal freedom.
So use it as a metaphor.
To grow, yeah.
It's been a fantastic evening. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm just going to do the wrap-up now.
Sure.
And we have indeed been speaking with the very talented, very capable, incredible military historian, military reenactor, Wayne Franks from Montreal. And he's been telling us creepy stories from reenactment sites right around North America. And he's also been telling us really creepy stories about his own experiences right in his own house and around his house. It's been an absolute blast, Wayne, spending the past 2 hours with you.
Sure, it's been fun.
Going to have you back on again. That being said, Wayne, I want to thank you again.
Well, thank you, Brent. It was a pleasure.
Fantastic, my friend. Thanks for listening, folks. This has been Brent Holland, your host for Night Fright. We'll see you soon.
Listening to Night Fright, Wednesday nights from 10 to midnight on CKLU 96.7 FM. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio.
same. No matter what happens, nothing ever seems to change. And the screaming so loud, I tremble with fright. The bed shakes and I'm wide awake, and once again I begin to wake. The storm rages on with the battle within. No matter what happens, no one ever seems to win. Someone says you fool for staying, and all alone I just keep praying. Another day, another fight, another smile, another endless night. Another day, another fight, another smile, another endless night. Reality crashes in, and silence becomes a sin. I sit and stare and I realize what I thought to be out was never, but always inside. I'm still running in the